to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the straight-to-video film Downtime, written by Mark Platt, the writer of Ghostlight, and is directed by Christopher Barry, one of the best directors of the series. Whoever put those two together to work on a story together earns a medal. That is just such a great idea, to put one of the best writers and put one of the best directors on a story together. This came out in 1995, which is actually a little bit later in the chronological timeline to which I'm doing it, but because the Doctor doesn't actually appear in this, and the Doctor doesn't really connect with any of this thing with this story, with this exception with something which I'll talk about in a sec. I'm decided to put it here in the chronological timeline, and also it just fits better because now we've had a Doctor story and not Doctor story, a Doctor story and not Doctor story, you know what I mean? This was one of the earliest productions by video company Real-Time Pictures, and what they do is, because we've talked about one of their stories before, Wartime, which was their first. They also had a story in between these two, Shakedown, the Sontaran film, but I really didn't want to tackle that because it's terrible, and I can't find it anymore, so luckily I've kind of avoided that one. Not on purpose, I did look for it, but I couldn't find it, so yeah, straight on to Downtime. And what they would do is, because the law on in Britain is very different compared to the laws in America when it comes to copyright, or at least back in those days. Many years ago, especially during the entire run of classic Doctor Who, what would happen is that when you create something, you would own the copyright for that specific piece of work, even if it's connected to a series. A great example would be the Daleks, which, despite being used by the BBC, despite being hugely connected with Doctor Who and their first appearance being in Doctor Who, the BBC don't actually own the rights to the Daleks. It's actually owned by the Terry Nation estate, Terry Nation being the creator of the Daleks. Same could be said for the Sontarans, the Brigadier, and just so many other characters in Doctor Who that I could be wrong, but I'm sure I've heard that the only actual thing that's owned by the BBC is the Doctor character himself, the concept of the TARDIS, not the actual TARDIS itself, the concept of the TARDIS, and the theme music. That's just a really strange thought. And so that's how they got to make all of these films. What they would do is they would ask, not the BBC, but they would ask the copyright holders, the creators of each particular character, can they use them in these films? Which is also why, because the BBC didn't acknowledge any of these, do we have no direct references to the Doctor himself, despite the fact that he is mentioned, but without his name. Like they talk about him. At one point, one character talks about like her time in the TARDIS, and they mention events in Doctor Who, but they're not allowed to directly reference the Doctor. Another fun fact about this story, which personally gets me a little bit excited, even though we'll never see it, is that Doctor Who fan, or should we say former Doctor Who fan, Ian Levine, who is also better known as Doctor Who's unofficial continuity advisor, he actually did a reconstruction of this story, which cannot be shown publicly due to copyright issues, which is I find really funny. And what he did is, he actually got in contact with Sylvester McCoy and added a few scenes with the Doctor talking to one of the characters, and it's basically like viewing this story like a chess piece, and like all these characters are him playing this cosmic game. So that's really cool. This story sees the return of the Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, now retired. They do mention the fact that he works in a school. So we don't know where this takes place in his continuity, whether it takes place before or after Battlefield. I presumed it takes place after Battlefield. That's why I'm making this video after I've done the video of Battlefield. But there's a chance that it could be continuity-wise prior to Battlefield. It sees the return of Sarah Jane Smith, played by the fantastic Elizabeth Sladen, who hasn't lost a bit of her energy. Although, you might be disappointed to know that her role is kind of small in a way. She's not like, she comes off as a minor character rather than one of the leading characters, at least for the second half. She does appear a lot of it in the first half. And it also sees the return of none other than Victoria Waterfield, who actually is kind of like the main villain of the story for the most part. And as well, the biggest return in this, or at least in my opinion, is the return of the Great Intelligence and the Yeti from the stories The Abominable Snowmen and The Web of Fear, creating a sort of loose trilogy between these three stories, as this sees the end of the original interpretation of the Great Intelligence. He would later return in the 7th season of the new series of Doctor Who. However, the character is so completely different that, personally, my headcanon is that they're completely different characters. That's just me. So, yeah, I think I've talked about everything I want to talk about this story prior to it, so let's delve in. The story starts off with Victoria actually returning to the Tibetan monastery first seen in The Abominable Snowmen. I can't remember which one it's called. Sorry to interrupt, but I just remembered something. This is the official DVD cover, which is really nice, really cool. And like always, I've printed off my own. Well, I say I printed my own, but I printed it, but I didn't actually make this. It's by Christopher Luthus, which is a great website, highly recommend it, who makes these awesome covers, and yeah, that's really cool. I'm really happy how that turned out. So, you know what's going to happen now? We've got to put them together. Ready? Steady. 1, 2, 3. There we go. See how cool that is. That's the spine, if anyone's interested. It says, I don't know if you can see it, but it says, from the world of the TV's Doctor Who. And there's the spine, which I kind of added the details because it didn't have those originally. But apart from that, it's basically the cover you can find easily on the interweb. So like I was saying, Victoria goes back to the Tibetan monastery, and she explains that basically she's been hearing voices, the voices of her father, and that it's brought her to the monastery, and it's kind of like possessing her in a way. We later hear the voice as well, calling out for her to seek out the truth, to seek out the world's answer to life, the universe, and everything. Okay, he doesn't actually say that, but you know what I mean. And then we get we cut then, I think it was like 15 years later, and we actually get introduced to a woman named Kate and her son Gordon, who live on a boat, and they see that there are these kids outside their boat. These kids called New Worlders or Chibis, which is just such a silly word, and I hate it every time it gets mentioned. Chilies, makes it feel really campy, really silly and stupid, but that's just a small little detail. And she basically explains to somebody on her phone that she tried calling the police, but every time the police turn up, these New Worlders, they just disappear, and then they reappear when the police are not there. They're kind of like tracking her, keeping an eye on her, until one of the person on the other line of the phone suggests, why don't she call up her father to help? And she's like, it can't be, we haven't spoken to him since, I believe it was 8 years or 6 years. And she puts the phone down, and she puts the phone by a photo of her father. Her father is Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And this isn't just any Kate. This is Kate Lethbridge Stewart. What makes this particularly awesome for Doctor Who fans is that this is the first appearance of Kate, who would later go on to appear in the new series of Doctor Who. Yes, this story introduces a character which would be appearing in the new series. That is just, I really love it when series do that. I mean, it's not important. What's really great is that it's not like it's an important connection. They're played by different actresses, although it's clear it's supposed to be the same character with the same colour hair and the same name. But it's not important. Like, you could go on living, believing that Kate Stewart originated in the new series of Doctor Who, and you wouldn't feel like you're missing anything. But the fact that she appears in this, and this is her first appearance, just like, wow, the BBC acknowledged a straight-to-video film from 1995. That's just really cool. I just love that little detail. Sorry, I'm completely off topic. Later on, we also see Sarah Jane Smith. She's going into this New World University that is run by Victoria Waterfield. She's seemingly I can't remember what she's called her. She's not particularly the leader of this university. There's this extra head, this extra leader above her who states it's like he's never around, he won't be seen by anybody. And basically, these people have hired journalist Sarah Jane Smith to track down a few people and get some information about them. To which she has to report in saying that she got most of them, but she didn't because she didn't get some of them because majority of them are actually backed up by military secrets. If she went looking into these people, she would be breaking military laws. And particularly, one person they asked, she actually didn't investigate at all. And when they explain who this person is and that they need to find out where he is and who this person is, it's revealed to be none other than the Brigadier himself, who throughout the story, he has this kind of dream, this kind of psychic connection. He gets brought onto like this windy beach, which reminds me a lot of the Matrix scenes in the Trial of the Time Lord story, The Ultimate Foe. Here it's used as a astral projection, as one of his students, or at least his former student from the school that Brigadier is working for. has actually learned like Ouija boards and like the supernatural, and has actually learned to connect people through the astral projection, and he fears that some evil is going on with the New World Order, the university. We later see this character investigating and actually uncovering secrets that the Brigadier is one person they're trying to track down, and that they're looking for the Lotus. And also as well, in a really funny scene, his computer becomes alive, and this character has to then get chased down by these New World Order university students who walk around with these green sweaters, a yellow shirt, his green silly hat and headphones, and they seem to be mind controlled by Victoria and this other character. So yeah, there's a lot to tackle on here. We've got a few different subplots that intertwine into the story, and I will admit, I think the story tries to juggle way too much than it needs to be. For example, I think Sarah Jane's plot in this story could have been taken out. It's really nice that she's there, and Elizabeth Sladen always does a fantastic job, and she's always charming and sweet, and I am very glad that she's in this. But in terms of the plot, and this story is very focused on its plot, she kind of is redundant in this story. The plots, the elements that we learn through her, we learn through other characters, and time that we spend with her could have been used to explain more the dynamic between Kate and the Brigadier. I know he's not the Brigadier in this story, but come on, it's the Brigadier. What else are you going to call him? Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, yeah, I know, but, you know. And there's a lot, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of juggling around. We follow the Brigadier, who gets the message from an old unit. No, it wasn't the old unit, like a new unit boy who wants to ask the Brigadier for advice, and so he heads off to London, whilst during the way he has these dreams of in an astral projection, and he sees Victoria around, and he doesn't recognise her. You might consider that a plot hole, as the Brigadier, back when he was a sergeant, did actually meet Victoria. However, how many people do you remember just by their face? Like, I believe it was like 20, 30 years ago at this point. So I don't blame her for that, and I think it actually really works that he doesn't remember her. And he's like loads of scenes with him in the astral projection, and I think they kind of state that the sentient being of the great intelligence actually provides in this dimension. One scene we actually see Victoria's hand being grabbed by a white creature with web all over his hands. He is off screen, and you can only just see his hand being grabbed as this creature speaks. So presumably this is the great intelligence, which then begs the question, knowing later Doctor Who stories, was she looking at Richard E. Grant? Could be. We got Sarah Train trying to investigate this place, and she kind of gets the feeling, obviously, that something is wrong. She explains that something about this New World Order is connected to an event specifically in London. I think I remember. It's the list of people that she was asked to investigate, these military personnel, were actually connected to an event in London almost 30 years ago, where the entire London had to be evacuated because of something to do with some sort of mysterious gas that was being attacked around the London Underground, a reference to the Web of Fear. And something clicks within Sarah Jane as she recognises one of the names that wasn't actually asked to be investigated. And she kind of clicks that this woman is that person, that she is Victoria Waterfield. And Sarah Jane actually remembers the doctor referring to Victoria Waterfield at one point later on in the story, which is a really nice touch. It's one of those scenes as well where we get a slight little nudge about the doctor as Victoria explains. It's like, would you believe that I'm 114 years old? And Sarah Jane is like, peanuts. I used to know somebody who was... And then she stops herself and she realises that in a normal society that might be a bit strange understanding. We also get this, the kid that used to go to Brigadier's school, the one who learned to do astral projection, and he befriends a homeless man played by none other than Joffrey Breves, aka the Master from the Creeper of Traken. And they have to go and find the Brigadier before the New World students do. So there's a lot of plot elements. I think a majority of them could have easily been cut, especially with Sarah Jane's part. Her plot elements, not that it's bad, but with the stuff with the Brigadier and the psychic kid, her plot kind of becomes redundant as we learn stuff that we also learn later on in the story. And I think the plot is a bit jumbled and a bit jarred in that sense. This story has the reintroduction of the Yetis. However, this is a completely new model. They have these like beetle-looking eyes, and instead of being giant robots, the orbs which the intelligence was using to control them actually touch upon a human being on their chest and transforms them into a Yeti. This comes off as some greatly terrifying scenes in which characters in very confined spaces, especially one when the Brigadier meets up with his daughter again, because she called him up because to explain about the New Worlders. The Brigadier earlier on had an encounter with them, so he knows that they're bad. And we later learn that just after the Brigadier gets attacked, the psychic kid and the homeless man, they come up and rescue the Brigadier. When the Brigadier first sees the homeless man, just before he falls unconscious, he says, "Is it you again? Have you changed your face?" Basically, he thought he was the doctor, which obviously we know he's not. But it's really nice that we have a little connection out of that, especially how the homeless man has like a long jacket and a scarf, which is very much like a Doctor Who-y kind of dress up. And we later learn the plot twist, I guess, is that the psychic kid was actually, unbeknownst to himself, was actually being semi-mind controlled to track down the Brigadier, to try and find the Lotus, which Kate Stewart was actually kept as she had it when she was a child. The Brigadier brought it home by accident, and Kate kept it as a toy when she was a little girl. And so the New Worlders then track them down, and the orb then touches the mind control kid, the psychic one, and it is really confined both turns into a Yeti. I really like this idea. I'm so glad they got this. It's a very great way to have like the villains just like suddenly appear, unlike the previous Yetis who have to like storm out of tunnels and stuff, which were good in those stories, but here it really does work. The Great Intelligence himself takes the form of Professor Travis's dead body being resurrected as the Intelligence's sentience, which some of you might remember. He can do that. He takes over the bodies of people and kind of reanimates them. Professor Travis is actually played by Professor Travis, the guy from both The Abominable Snowman and The Web of Fear. And the fact that he appears in all three stories, not in any of the new series, is why I personally like to call these three stories the Travis Trilogy. I don't know if that's a term I picked up or whether I came up with it, but I like to consider it the Travis Trilogy. It just sounds really, really cool. And basically, using his psychic, semi-psychic connection, he's been controlling Victoria into believing that he is her father, who didn't actually die during the Dalek, the events of, is it Evil of the Daleks? I believe it's Evil of the Daleks. But obviously, it doesn't really work out if you actually watch these stories, as he looks nothing like her father. But it's kind of a behind-the-scenes reason as why she refers to Travis as her father. For you see, the actor who plays Travis is actually the actresses who plays Victoria Waterfield's real-life father. So that's really cool. Some of the scenes with Travis are kind of silly. You got him with this really cool voice, like that demands everything. But to see him walking around in this really obese old man's body, threatening people, really comes off as pretty ridiculous. It works in the scenes in university because we kind of get the sense that he's mind controlling everybody, and that you do get the impression that if he so choose, he can command all of the teenagers to attack you, to attack the characters. But when you see him just wandering around, chasing after the psychic kid and the homeless man all by himself, it does seem pretty silly. It does seem pretty bizarre. So I'm ashamed to say that it's not one of Mark Platt's greatest scripts. But I think, not in terms of like a full-on production, I think it might even be his weakest story as well. But as a cheap, straight-to-video story, Christopher Barry does a fantastic job here. The scenes in the astral projection world I particularly like. There's a lot of great small little touches. I like how every time the Brigadier has like a weird projection, the camera kind of tilts in a Dutch angle like that, which is really cool. And the story has, at the end of it, see that the internet is actually the reason why the Great Intelligence, who in the last story, The Web of Fear, was sent out into space with his mindless body to go around through the mists of the universe aimlessly, actually got reconnected by the internet. He got back on Earth due to the fact that the internet, which has set out signals and satellites, has actually brought his consciousness back, and he's kind of infected the internet in that capacity. And these New World kids have been basically setting up this program so that he can take over the world and use the internet to spread his web over the entire planet. And we see this effect, which looks pretty good for 2005's, sorry, not 2005, 1995. It just hit me this story came out 10 years exactly before New Who. It's very strange, that. Yeah, that's very strange. I've never noticed that before. For 1995 special effects for straight-to-video, it actually looks pretty decent, I think. And the Brigadier Sarah and Kate try to infiltrate the university, and they capture the Brigadier and Kate. The Great Intelligence threatens that he's going to turn Kate into the first of the new Yetis, the new creatures that will dominate his world. But the Brigadier kind of clicks on how to defeat them, as when he learns about this whole connection thing. We get this really great scene where he's like, you know, for a creature that's purely intelligent, you really are an idiot. He notices that that Sarah Jane is in the distance and can hear him, and he starts shouting, "All you have to do to defeat you is to destroy the generator." And Sarah Jane hears this, and she goes into the generator room, which is connecting all these computers together. And this Yeti comes to attack her, only it seems to be complex. It seems to not know who's the villain. And during this whole thing outside of the Brigadier, Victoria actually comes to her senses. Actually, it's kind of like a little bit earlier than that, and she explains to the Brigadier, it's like, "No, you got to get away. It's not safe. Please, I was manipulated. I was betrayed. You got to help, but you can't be here. It's not safe." And Sarah Jane throws off this Yeti, who turns out to be the psychic kid, who's kind of like regaining his consciousness. And Sarah Jane pushes him onto the machinery, destroying it, sending the Great Intelligence's consciousness back into space, where hopefully he will not do anything anymore. We also see, I can't remember who, Kate. Kate shoots the Great Intelligences in Travis's body. So this is actually the death of Travis. They actually killed off a semi-important character in classic Doctor Who, especially the late 60s stories, which I find a much more bigger detail than I think it really should be, than it gets mentioned. It's like they killed off a character who's in two of the most important classic Who stories. I mean, surely this would be his last appearance, the actor who played him, but they killed him off. That takes some guts for a technically unofficial connected Doctor Who film, in a way. Yeah. We see then Victoria looking out at all this, and she walks off as as the Brigadier Kate and Sarah basically like, we saved the day. The final scene has the Brigadier finally meeting his grandson, Gordon, who explains that he's got another friend, an invisible friend, an imaginary friend, who turns out to be the psychic kid, who has kind of sent his consciousness as a friend to the Brigadier's grandson. Which, now that I say it out loud, it's really bloody creepy there, mate. It's very strange, it's very kind of disturbing. Oh no, I'm dead. Now let's go and hunt this small little child. I shouldn't do that. Sarah Jane and the Brigadier actually talk about Victoria. Basically, Sarah Jane explains, it's like, I remember the doctor, obviously she can't mention him, and she mentions the scene in Pyramid of Mars where she's wearing the dress and the doctor's like, they used to belong to my friend Victoria Waterfield, and the Brigadier's like, do you really think it's the same person? And they're like, we don't know, she kind of disappeared, she might never be seen again. And there you go, that's Downtime. Overall, it's kind of a mixed bag. The plot isn't really that strong. The production feels really weak. The idea of these university students being mind control is kind of silly and ridiculous. At least the way it's played out. Not that that necessarily means it's a bad idea, but the fact that one of the greatest Doctor Who villains, the Great Intelligence himself, is using these kids does kind of come off as a bit silly. But it has some really great performances by Nicholas Courtney, Elizabeth Sladen, Darodar Walterins, which I believe is the name of the actress who plays Victoria Waterfield. But it's just a very strange production. It's strange to see so many Doctor Who characters and no real mention of the Doctor. It's very strange to see K9's not even in it, despite John Leeson actually having a small appearance in the story. Maybe they couldn't get the rights, I don't know. But Sarah Jane still technically has K9. Actually, I tell you what, it's actually explained. Sarah Jane's K9 had a default and broke down prior to this story, which is explained in School Reunion. God, the canonicity in Doctor Who is just absolutely love it. But it's a lot of fun, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not particularly the strongest, but I say highly recommended if you're a huge Doctor Who fan, especially if you're you love these characters. It almost feels like, in a way, a precursor to the Sarah Jane adventures, especially when you have a much older Elizabeth Sladen becoming a main character in a way. But there's too many characters, and a few of ridiculous scenes means it stops it from being a particularly amazing production. So there you go, that's Downtime. So join me next time when we go to the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who and we cross over with EastEnders. So join me next time for Dimensions in Time. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!